You mentioned, betting on yourself, I think is so important, and we'll get into it a little more. But I think the first time you bet on yourself is the most terrifying thing, especially when it's a higher stakes
Yeah.
aspect of your life. For example, you quitting a job and quitting, especially a career like teaching or moving on
Yeah.
from a career like teaching. It's not one of those jobs that you signed up for a couple of years and then you're done. It's kind of, I think a lot of times you believe it's as you mentioned until you retire.
Yeah, it was my forever career, and I think when I left it, I know for some of my colleagues and some of my peers that I've stayed close with, it caught some people by surprise because I think I was one of them that was willing to put up with maybe some of the things that were a little less advantageous as the career wore on, because it was just what I wanted to do or what I thought I wanted to do. But again, life introduced. I'm a big believer. Life introduces some things at the right time for the right reasons for you, and sometimes you don't know the end game when that happens. But if you're open to the opportunity of saying, "Hey, you know, let's have an adventure here," and again, bet on myself. Like I don't know how it's going to look. I've stopped asking the how on things a lot of times, but I just know that for the sake of my family, my kids, my wife, and just myself, I refuse to let myself not figure things out even when they become difficult. So
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with a very special guest, Dan Howard. How are you doing today?
I am good, Jeremy. How are you?
I can't complain, and it did feel a little weird calling you Dan Howard. I've pretty much always called you Coach.
Yeah, no, I've gotten that a lot in my past teaching days when I see students now that are grown or whatever. It's always that weird, like, is it Mr. Howard or is it? I'm like, no, it's all good. Dan's fine or whatever. So yeah, feel free to, you know, say whatever comes natural to you on that end.
I love it. So, I always like to kick off the show and talk about the importance of networking. How do we know each other?
Well, I mean, you can fill in any blanks or any details that I might be misconstruing, but I vaguely remember, I believe, freshman sophomore years when I first met you on the football field as I was your yeah, either freshman or JV coach. I forget which year because I did freshman football for a while there and then transferred into JV and then on to varsity. And so I think that's where we first crossed paths was probably your sophomore year, give or take, on the football field. Would that be about right for
That
you?
sounds about right. It has been quite a while. I don't quite remember it,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things where, while my 5'6" stature never really led to a promising football career, I always had fun being out there with the coaches and with my friends, and doing all that fun things. And I learned
Yeah.
later it would really help me career wise too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can relate. And so I think as a coach, my playing days were very limited due to my 5'8" frame, and as a quarterback and basketball player and everything else that I tried to do in high school, I was not gifted with the 6'5" frame that would allow me to dominate the field real well on that stuff. So yeah, so I just had fun being with friends and being around the game and just competition and everything in general. So but
Absolutely. I want to know from your perspective that origin story, comic book issue number one. Who are you, and where'd you get your start?
Who am I? I mean, we can go way back to 1981 when I was born, but I think for me, who I am now today, I started my path as you know, we met because I was a teacher. My past professional life, when I was a young guy before marriage, before whatever, I was an elementary physical education teacher for I think it ended up being 12 years before I left the career. And coached high school football for all 12 of those, and actually coached high school baseball for about 16 of those. I was actually coaching in college. So my first year, when I was done playing in high school, that very next summer, I became the freshman coach at Hamilton, coming back. So started out my life teaching. I come from a long line of teachers in my family. Both parents were teachers, and that I gravitated towards that career early on. And as we know, life can take you on some different journeys. And while I thought teaching was my till death do me part career, it ended up not going that way. I met some different people at the right time in life and brought me to a journey here as a financial advisor now at Northwestern Mutual. So
I love that. So, Dan, you mentioned that your parents were educators. Do you think that's really what pushed you in that direction? Because I'm always curious how, people who go into education kind of their reason or what they envisioned it being.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, you know, parents for a lot of people, mine no different, have an impact subtly or not so subtly, just because you see their lifestyle and you either look at them and say, "Hey, I kind of want what they have," or something similar to that. Or you might look, some people might look at their parents or their role models and be like, "Oh, I want to go a totally different path because I see how they are, and that totally doesn't vibe with me." And so for me, I looked at my parents. My dad was able to come to my games when I was growing up, and my mom was around, and they never had to travel on weekends to business trips or whatever. I'm like, I want a family, and I think teaching allowed me to do that, and not have to be away from the family structure as much as maybe some other career opportunities might take you. And I wanted to coach, and I love sports, and so I wanted to be around sports, and so I thought teaching was a perfect blend of a career that could let me um, be a family guy, which was always very important to me, and also be around athletics and sports and be able to coach and have a long tenure doing that. So
So you mentioned you went into coaching pretty much right into college. What made you decide that right away? Was it just the urge to coach, or how did that happen?
I think it was part by default of, like we had talked about, our physiques were not meant to be players for a very long time after our playing days were done in school. And but I still had a love of the game, and I was always the guy on the team back in the day. Well, I might not have played all the time or whatever, but I was the guy that the coaches looked to help them run practice sometimes. Like I would, my sophomore year in high school, I would signal in plays to the quarterback, and the coach trusted me enough to, you know, know the system and do all that stuff so we could run no huddle. And I was that sophomore doing that. And so I always had a knack of the intelligence of the game, and loved athletics enough and loved what I could do and how I could impact kids and players and people I was around. Um, to where that was just a natural progression. So when I left high school, I obviously had enough good relationships from past coaches and everything where one of them brought me on board and said, "Hey, would you love to take over the freshman team?" I'm like, "Absolutely." And then from there, it just spun into a decade and a half of being around athletics to some degree at the high school. So,
I love that. I love that. So the big thing is you eventually left education. I always joke I was in education about a year.
yeah,
It's a year, 3 years, 5 years, and if you get past that 5 year mark, you're kind of a lifer
yeah.
in most cases. Take me to that moment.
Yeah, I mean and I think this speaks to the heart of the podcast here and what you're doing, which I love, the concept, because I think, one, every day we wake up and it's always into the unknown, even if we think we know what's going on. But certainly, there's some big moments in life that we all come across that make us reevaluate where our goals are. And I love teaching. I love the people I met there. I love the kids like yourself, that I got to meet and have an impact on, and hopefully I was a positive role model for them. Um, but things change, and in the climate in Wisconsin, without going down the rabbit hole of everything else, there are some winds of change in the uh, district spectrum statewide that made, when I went into teaching, I saw the goals of saying, all right, family life, and here's what it could look like when I retire 35 years from now and whatever. And I had what I thought was a clear roadmap to have a professional life that would fulfill me. And about 12 years in, there were some things that changed that all of a sudden made that vision much foggier. And so it was probably about 2, 3 years of contemplating it before inevitably the right people came into my world at the right time, that made me open my eyes to say, okay, is there something else out there for me? And so before I came here as a financial advisor, I had a little side hiccup with Under Armour, working as a regional sales rep for a company called College Town. And it was dealing with local high schools, businesses, you name it, anybody who would want an Under Armour logo and brand their thing on, obviously, high schools, uniforms, apparel, spirit wear, stuff like that. But some of the coaches I worked with introduced me to one of the regional reps there. He was a great guy, and um, took an interview in the summer after 2016, when I was like, all right, let's see where this goes. And ironically, as I was doing that, I had just started working with a financial advisor myself at Northwestern Mutual. And even though we were several months into a relationship of kind of learning each other and my whole situation, I came to him and said, hey, I might have a career change opportunity. Should I do this? I don't want to commit, career suicide and, leave my young family at the time. I think my boys were 6 months old and 2 years old at the time, and leave them high and dry with a dad who doesn't know where he's going in life professionally. And he crunched the numbers and helped me look through things and said, hey, I think if you're willing to bet on yourself, this is an opportunity that I think would allow you to grow in a way that maybe teaching or the education field is stunting for you right now. And so I ended up doing that. And that led me to Under Armour, which I did for about 8 months. Did well at it. Some fun experiences. Got to go out to Vegas for the first time with some of the regional people there and some of the stuff. But I soon found out that if I was in a world where I was waking up at 3 a.m. worrying about how many royal blue t-shirts we had in inventory, and, taking phone calls on Christmas Eve for a basketball coach who needed some new shoes for a couple of his kids whose, stuff blew out in practice the day before. I'm like, if I'm still doing this when I'm 60, I'll be dead, divorced, or both. And that is certainly not the goal that I wanted for myself. So that was that part of the journey on that end.
Yeah, you mentioned, betting on yourself, I think is so important, and we'll get into it a little more, but I think the first time you bet on yourself, it's the most terrifying thing, especially when it's a higher stakes
Yeah.
aspect of your life. For example, you quitting a job and, quitting, especially a career like teaching or moving on
Yeah.
from a career like teaching. It's not one of those jobs that you signed up for a couple of years and then you're done. It's kind of, I think a lot of times you believe it's, as you mentioned, until you retire.
Yeah, it was my forever career, and I think when I left it, I know for some of my colleagues and some of my peers that I've stayed close with, it caught some people by surprise because I think I was one of them that was willing to put up with maybe some of the things that were a little less advantageous as the career wore on, because it was just what I wanted to do or what I thought I wanted to do. But again, life introduced. I'm a big believer. Life introduces some things at the right time for the right reasons for you, and sometimes you don't know the end game when that happens. But if you're open to the opportunity of saying, "Hey, let's have an adventure here," and again, bet on myself. Like I don't know how it's going to look. I've stopped asking the how on things a lot of times, but I just know that for the sake of my family, my kids, my wife, and just myself, I refuse to let myself not figure things out even when they become difficult. So
Dan, I love that. I love that outlook, and I think it's so important. And also, I mean, obviously, you didn't just take 12 years of a career and throw it away. I think so much, and I tell people I love the aspect of education. Even while my time at Eau Claire in college, learning the aspects, I think for me, it worked on my soft people skills. The fact that I can have a conversation with just about anyone about just about anything. And as you know, I tell people, I was in front of a middle school classroom. Once you get in front
yes.
of kids and talk to them, everyone else is easy. Everyone else is easy. You're not that first classroom I've ever had, and it's the most
Yep.
terrifying thing. And you got a bunch of 12-year-olds staring at you, trying to figure
Yep.
out figure themselves out while figuring you out, while worrying about who's talking to who and if I'm gonna be late for my next class.
Yeah, I lost all fear of speaking in front of people when I had to when I was tasked with doing the human growth and development unit for the district and having to present to 150 parents who were nervous that I was going to be teaching about some really sensitive stuff to their kids, and I'm like, no, trust me, we're going to talk deodorant and
Yep.
making sure that they shower, and we're going to stay away from any of that stuff. But that trains you. And I joke too, like a good teacher has to have a lot of skills communication wise. You got to be a comedian, you got to be a doctor, sometimes you got to be a judge, a jury, you also have to be a teacher. You have to do wear a lot of different hats to be able to get your lesson and point across and deal with humans. A lot, 30 kids in the class, all 30 of them have a different personality type, a different, way that they learn, a different, thing that drives and motivates them. And you have to kind of be all in one to make sure that you're trying to reach as many people as possible. So
And I think as an educator, you realize that adults are kind of just big children. So a lot of those same aspects that applied to the classroom, I feel like applied to talking to people in general in whatever field you're in.
absolutely. And I joke now because now that I'm in the world of finance, being a former FIED guy, I tell people, I'm like, yeah, I went from throwing dodgeballs to now managing assets and helping people with insurance and everything else. And I joke, it's a seamless transition, but really it is. I mean, the teaching skills I had, the ability to take a complex subject and make it easier to understand or relatable to a different audience is the exact same things I was doing in true education, but I'm doing it now, just an older student and a different curriculum than what I had, 8, 9 years ago.
So take me through what you're doing as a financial advisor there.
So I mean, yeah, I started in early 2017, and when I left Under Armour, I'd gone back to my financial advisor and just, he was kind of in my ear, like, well, have you ever thought about doing what I'm doing? I'm like, never in a million years. But he just kind of showed me. He's like, here's what I do, and here's whatever. And obviously, I had gone through some planning with him and with my wife and I and our family about things, and learned a ton from that. I'm like, well, I have those soft skills to be able to talk to people that way. I haven't learned anything about the ins and outs of the tools. And he said, well, candidly, that's the biggest thing people need, is like the ability to talk to somebody is rare. We can, for the company that I operate under, and all the other big firms that are out there, they can teach you the tools, the tricks of the trade and all that other stuff. But can you connect with somebody on a level that lets them trust you and build? And so what I'm doing now is I've been here since 2017. Off the top of my head, I've got 400 households as clients. I started from scratch, so it's not like you walk in and they hand you a book of business of 100 people and say, "Hey, service these." It's you. I started from scratch and have built a pretty good system here for the last 8, 9 years doing this, coming in. And then so now I help people with their just managing financial plans. So some people come to me with retirement needs. Some people come with insurance needs, a whole host of things. Some people might be job changers who have benefits at one place, and now they go someplace else and just need to learn about those. And so just help people understand their situation of where they're at today and help them make good decisions to help reach the goals that they want to have for tomorrow, for themselves or the people that they care about.
That's great, Dan. And I think I obviously with you, I know that probably know the answer already, but on everyone's journey, you take a path. You could go east, you could go west. Can you give me a time that you just went for it and how it turned out?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it was the jump into this career. It's I know very little Spanish, French, and German from my days in middle school when they forced you to take one each semester for those years. But teaching, I knew the curriculum. I played sports, and so I knew fitness, and I obviously went to school for that. And so and Under Armour was different because it was just kind of like here's a thing, go get in the hands of as many people as possible. Versus this, the stakes are so much more are more important. It's like these are people's lives and livelihoods and hopes and dreams or whatever, that they're placing trust in my hands. And so like we were talking offline a little bit beforehand, that early on, that imposter syndrome of saying, all right, what makes me any more relevant to do that? And I think, what I have is I have the ability to really care, to really be genuine and honest, and really try to be that person that they can rely on coming through. And so that leap of faith where I said, all right, I'm going to go into a career that I know nothing about, but obviously I passed tests. I've gotten certifications and designations to prove that I am worthy to be where I'm at currently now. But that first year, there was a lot of, it was like trying to learn a completely different language, Mandarin or something that I have no background in whatsoever. And so going from 0 to 180 degrees different from what I was doing to this was certainly something that I was betting on myself, but candidly, I was betting on myself without knowing how it was going to end up. So
We talked about that a little bit. It's you get to the point you stop asking how it's going to end up after the
exactly.
first time. I say a lot of times with going into the unknown, it's kind of like that roller coaster. You feel it at the top, and you do that drop down. You feel in the pit of your stomach. You're like, did I just make the biggest mistake of my life?
I
And
have
then
had that
it's
thought.
right. So you kind of
Yeah,
even out and you kind of go up another one. And I think a
yeah.
couple times on the ride, you kind of know what to expect. For me, a lot of times now with the unknown, I kind of lean into it a little more than I probably did initially. I definitely did initially.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And I think there's still moments where I think anybody who's really trying to be self-aware and work and keep progressing and keep, a colleague of mine always says, green and growing, ripe and rotting. And so I always try to be that person who's you know always trying to learn something new. And I think that's a healthy mindset to have. But yeah, that first year there was definitely some times where it's like, what am I doing? And do I belong here? But I think that's also driven me to keep learning more and keep trying to get better and be the best that I can be with that stuff.
And one thing I always like to hit on or think about is, in sports and everything, we always have coaches. We always have people that are
Mhm.
directing us. A quarterback out isn't out there on the field by himself. He has someone calling plays, like someone like you calling plays. And
Yep.
it's one of those things where I think coaching is so important outside of just athletics. I have business coaches. I have people that, kind of a circle of trust, even with people that I know that, hey, they listen to the podcast. Hey, I didn't really, you weren't really clear here. Or, hey, you're talking about this too much. Or, hey,
Yeah.
here's what I'm seeing. It's nice to have someone with that bird's eye view, just kind of like what you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think, all the I'm certainly not comparing myself to any of the great athletes of the world, but the Jordans, the Tiger Woods, all the people that have reached the pinnacle of their stuff. I think. They never did it by themselves. I mean, certainly they put the work in, by themselves, but they had somebody who was helping them get 1% better or tweaking things here or there. And I'm certainly no different. I've had a lot of great mentors along the way, a lot of great um, more experienced colleagues that I've leaned into as I was learning the system early on and how to navigate these new waters, and certainly business coaches and everything that I've partnered up with over the years as well too. So yeah, the mentor relationship. Nobody ever gets anywhere successful by themselves, and I'm no different. I don't think anybody who's reached um, any grounds of good, success or anything, got there just by themselves. They certainly put in a lot of work themselves, but there were people in their corner that were helping them through those days that were questioning, what am I doing here? So,
I couldn't agree more. Title of the podcast, Into the Unknown. What are you working on? What do you got going on in the next couple, let's say this year, 2025?
yeah, this year's goal is to add another designation. So I just finished up what's called the RICP designation, which stands for Retirement Income Certified Planner. I got that last year. Um, and I think one of the biggest things to help make sure that you're always feeling like you are in the best position to help people and support people that you meet, is to continuously keep learning, keep growing your skill set. And so I'd like to add another designation. There's some investment licensing I might be looking into, or potentially some other career designations that I'm looking to get into as well. I also, as a side project, am working on writing a book. I've had some thoughts in my head, and at the end of last year, I thought, hey, why not, I've been told by people that everybody has a story inside of them, and I don't think I'm any different. And while my story I don't think is any better or worse than others, um, I get to work on a keyboard at night and put it down on paper and see where it goes.
I love that, Dan. If people want to know more about what you're doing or potentially work with you, where can they find you? Where can they reach out?
Well, I'm certainly on LinkedIn. I mean, I think from a business standpoint, that's been the most impactful business place to be in terms of just, from a professional standpoint. I live in a world of compliance, so there's a lot of things that we have to be very vanilla with on there. So I try to let my personality shine from time to time, but at the same time too, it's muted to a degree. But otherwise, best way to reach me, or best way to contact if anybody wants to work with me or learn more about me or anything else like that, is obviously just through direct contact. My email.
Absolutely. We'll make sure to link that in the show notes. And, again, man, I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I really did appreciate it.
Absolutely, Jeremy. That's great. One, good to catch up with you. It's been a while since we've seen each other in person, way back in the day. But I've been following your success and your path, through the channels, the LinkedIn stuff, and saw you in the College Football Hall of Fame, and now back in Milwaukee and everything. And it's really cool. One of the coolest things about my career as a teacher and coach, and even now as an advisor, because I've got so many clients and households, is that the ability to just see people and watch their journeys progress. As a teacher, watching former students who were, fourth grade, fifth grade, third grade, and into high school as a coach, and now seeing what they're into in their adult lives, kids, families, jobs, careers, things that they're into, is awesome. And then same with my clients, is to see how their families grow and how their lives change and how they're reaching different milestones. So it's and yeah, seeing where you are now, it's cool, and getting to reconnect with you has been awesome. So I appreciate you having me on here, and yeah,
We'll talk soon.
awesome, Jeremy. Take care, bud.
That was another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.